Welcome to the Octopod. I'm Kyle Davis, head of the Office of the CTO. Join us as we dive into the latest technologies and trends shaping business. Whether you're a tech enthusiast, a business leader, or just looking to stay ahead in the digital age, this podcast is for you. Let's unlock opportunities with technology together. Let's jump in.
Welcome everyone to a special edition with our partners Microsoft. We've been talking about this concept of Cloud Beyond IaaS and how we can drive cost optimization in our platforms. We started with 4 episodes introducing the concepts of cost optimization and then our 3 main conversations around hybrid cloud, app modernization and AI. We're now going to dive into each of them topics, and today I'm excited to be joined by Christophe from Microsoft and Jake from our Microsoft team to talk about the topic of hybrid cloud. Guys, do you want to introduce yourselves?
Yeah, hi Rob, Jake Walsh, Senior Solution Architect in CDW's Microsoft practice.
Hello, Christophe, Roux, Azure StackHCI as your local lead for the EMEA region at Microsoft.
Thanks both. So for everyone that's been listening, we've already had parts 1 and 2 here where we talked about what is the adaptive cloud, and we then talked in part 2 about some of the core use cases in the data center and a little bit at the edge with AVD, etc. But now we're going to really dig into them edge use cases. And I guess, Christophe, coming to you first, we talk about edge, but what do we actually mean? We talk about terms like near edge and far edge and all this sort of stuff. In your view, what is the sort of difference between these different types of edge?
It's a very good question because I would say that every customer, every company has its own definition of edge. So today when we will talk about edge, we'll talk about the production site, the site where something happens, as opposed to the data center where it's, let's say, a machine room. The production site is called the edge in that conversation. It's a hospital, it's a retail store, it's an airport, it's a factory. This is how we define edge. And then in this edge site, you would have different edge components. We would consider the heavy edge, what used to be Azure StackHCI. That means a set of servers that centralize the data in the production site to process that data and compute it and then send it to the data center or to the cloud. And then we would consider the far edge. The far edge is much smaller. It's a device that connects to the systems, that has a little bit of CPU storage and to process data that is very specific to one single use case. So we could have a number of far edge connected to one heavy edge in the store, and that heavy edge is connected to the private cloud or to the public cloud outside of the edge site. This is how we would define the different edges.
Excellent. So with that definition, I think we already know that what was StackHCI, there's now Azure Local, could do that heavy edge piece, 1 node, 3 node, 16 node, whatever was needed to do that consolidation. But there was constraints there in the 10 gig networking, it's still a full node, etc. What have we been doing with this new Azure Local concept to drive that far edge piece? Because you're not going to want a 2U rack mount server sat in under a desk somewhere because it's just going to be far too big and has too many other environmental requirements.
Correct. We heard our customers saying, look, it's too big for what we aim at doing in our small store or in our small factory site, because we moved most of the workloads to the cloud already, but what remains needs to stay on site but doesn't require a lot of compute power. So for that, we are scaling down the capacity that we used to have to one single node that could contain only one SSD drive for data, have a 1 gigabit per second network interface, and could cost around $2,000 or let's say $2,000 to $5,000, so that you can equip a store or a small factory or a small site with that. You could eventually consider connecting those small devices to a bigger device in the site that would have more complex data processing power. So you could architect a layered approach with this small far edge device with one single SSD, 1 gigabit per second, and then connect it to a bigger set of servers, a cluster of servers in the site. Or directly connect this small device to Azure via internet or 5G.
And I guess the intention here is it's the same operating system that is still Azure Arc managed. All that operational simplicity we talked about in the previous episodes comes to these now new lightweight devices effectively. That consistent operating model is still there.
Exactly. The problem that we are facing now is that we have thousands of these devices across the world for some customers, or even tens of devices is already a challenge to manage, patch and update regularly, secured, monitor. And so what is the platform that can do that at scale? That is a question that our customer ask. And then we come back that the platform is Azure. As simple as that, Azure Local is Azure. So you would connect all those devices to Azure, and then from there you will operate them. You will manage the identity, so you could spread the management across different teams, eventually across different players in your organization. You could centralize the security. You could update them by selecting a group of devices and then launch an update through these devices. So I think we have put in place the framework so that the cost of administration doesn't grow with the number of devices to manage.
No, that makes sense. And a lot of sites these days are hyper-connected, always on, which is great. But what happens if we do have sites that go dark? Does Azure Local help us there as well at them sort of more extreme edge cases, maybe on a ship or an oil rig or somewhere like that where connectivity can be very spotty or even non-existent at all?
Those are the use cases that we face also with Azure Local. So we have a number of ships that are equipped with Azure Local across the globe. And we have mining sites that are in the remote places very far, with very low network. So we can also have dark sites, as you mentioned, like nuclear power plants or power plants, or those kind of sites. In that case, we need to have a solution that runs without internet at all. So we are launching a new version of Azure Local that can run autonomously without connection. So it will be a subscription for a year, and you would have a set of services and the control plane that will run on site as long as you have that connection to the cluster that execute the application. You can operate everything locally. So that is one of the reflection. And we are launching now this autonomous version of Azure Local that would address this kind of customers.
Excellent. And Jake, from the customers you're talking to, how does this sort of stuff resonate as far as that ability to deploy and manage true edge sort of deployments?
I think this just adds to the flexibility that this will provide to customers. So for example, perhaps in a previous deployment, it would have been, to your example earlier, a 2U server. Perhaps may not have been appropriate to go on a kiosk or a till or something like that. But actually what this is doing is providing that experience to more cases, more devices, more different use cases in different organizations. So it's just going to open up more opportunity for customers. And I think interestingly, customers that are already utilizing parts of this ecosystem are going to see their opportunities to use it for other use cases in their business also increase.
Yeah, that makes sense. I guess it's worth digging into some of these use cases then. Let's try and bring this to life a little bit for the people out there, because sometimes when you talk to people about edge, it's great as a concept, but actually then they struggle to contextualize that in context of their business. So I think we'd pick 3 verticals that were worth talking about. So retail, manufacturing, and healthcare. But maybe Christophe, you can start us off with, from a retail perspective, what are you seeing as the sort of edge use cases that the Azure Local platform is activating, and some of the value that customers are getting from that?
Yes, we get a lot of demand from retail. I think that retail has maintained their infrastructure unchanged for years, and now they are opening up to new use cases, and the existing infrastructure cannot keep up with those new use cases. Those new use cases require AI. Most of them, they use video streams to extract information. And typically, we have deployed that in a retailer in Australia. It's called Coles. They have 2,000 stores, and they have run video analytics on their streams with Azure StackHCI. With those video analytics, now they have the right product on the shelves. People are waiting less, the queue are shorter. They have reduced loss. So they have improved the efficiency of every store by getting that information. We are now in touch with most of the retailers that have the same kind of challenges. Is how do we modernize by maintaining the legacy application that needs to be maintained, point of sales, for instance, It's an application that remains and needs to be resilient to network failure. At the same time, with the same platform across thousands of stores, we want to deploy modern use cases powered by AI. So what is a platform that allows me to do both, maintaining the point of sales that is 10 years old and deploying computer vision, smart shelves, and all those use cases that needs to be deployed in the store.
Yes, I think that's really that sort of multimodal use case piece, isn't it? It's like, actually, here's a platform, support the legacy, support the new, but the new is also, like say, product placement, dwell time, queues, trips and hazards, staff safety, employee safety. There's all these different things that I think retailers are really interested in, but individually they're really hard to build a business case for. But actually, as an ecosystem, it becomes much easier to pull in multiple budget streams to deliver that.
Yeah, you're spot on. The business case changes. We used to have an infrastructure refresh business case, which was based on price. Now we have a new type of business case, which is based on value. It's how do we build a business case that is based on how much product I will sell and how much cost I will decrease, which is completely different. So we bring CCTV budget, we bring marketing budget, we bring infra budget in one single large budget. And when we have this budget, we can deploy a modern infrastructure in the store. This is a new type of business case that we see in retail.
Yeah, that makes sense. And Jake, are you seeing anything in this space that's sort of activated by these thoughts and conversations?
Yeah, I think this is, again, sort of interesting from the perspective of opening up additional use case. So some of the use cases we've talked about, identifying things like stock moves, loss, that sort of stuff. That's very interesting because that's the sort of data you would take, capture, and perhaps process at month end or process in the cloud. It's not data that you would want perhaps instantaneously. However, things like health and safety, staff safety, that sort of stuff is data that loses its relevance if it's not actioned on quickly. So there's a really interesting picture emerging where we have the opportunity to process things locally, action them very quickly, deal with things as they arise, but then also take data, process it, archive it, store it for historical use cases and that sort of stuff. So it's opening up a significant number of other options.
Yeah, I think that budget consolidation, that multiple work streams thing is so important. And then actually finding the right way to communicate that to the leadership of the retailer and the executives to show them the overall value of investing in a store modernization, because at the end of the day, margins are thin in retail and cost is a big challenge. So yeah, definitely something we need to be cognizant of. How does that conversation change, Christophe, when we go to something like manufacturing though? Because that's a different set of outcomes to a degree. I mean, same platform, same infrastructure, but what are the sort of outcomes we're seeing from a manufacturing perspective in your world?
So there are some commonalities with retail, but there are also some particularities. For instance, typically in a factory, you have an operational technology network that is mostly isolated from the IT network. So we have to comply with a set of operational constraints that are much stronger. But we comply with those constraints. And so we have the systems within Azure Arc that allows a customer to connect that OT environment to Azure, for instance, and we work with the security teams to do that. The second thing is that we need probably more compute power in a factory to host the manufacturing execution system, which is the brain of the factory. We run that, for instance, customers that run a vaccine production. So you can imagine the criticality of running a vaccine production chain line. That means that if the chain stops, you lose all the raw material. You cannot keep it. So it has to run 24/7. And we equip those chains with Azure StackHCI. So this is the type of use case we can address. We also have in car production factories. Like they produce a car every 45 seconds. Between two cars, you need to adjust, for instance, the cabling because there is a problem. There is a defect. So you have a camera that assists the operator that detects the defect, and the operator has 45 seconds to change that defect, or the car is extracted from the production line to be fixed. And so this is the kind of use cases that we produce with Azure StackHCI in the factory. So manufacturing 4.0 is a reality. You need some components that are real-time, that are resilient, and that can host a number of AI use cases like quality control, employee safety, you mentioned it, and a number of other use cases that are specific to each customer.
No, that makes sense. And Jake, from your perspective, if we look at the healthcare space as well, what are you seeing from an edge use case there?
I think, again, it's more about providing a platform that actually is not just ticking the boxes for what we need today. It's also providing a platform that we can build on for the future. So take, for example, the type of health and safety use case. There's a spill on the floor or something like that. That would be a really good use case that needs to be processed locally. There's no point being told about that 2 days later or whenever you decide to process it. But it's a really good example of buying into a platform that allows you to develop new use cases as they arise. So as your business, as your requirements, as your needs change or legal compliance changes or whatever standards you have to adhere to, you have a platform that you are able to build upon and utilize that to move forward. So I think we're starting to see those types of cases where people aren't looking for, I need to buy a solution for X, Y, Z. They're looking for a platform that allows those solutions to sit upon it.
No, that makes sense. And I guess when we go into the hospitals, we've got lots of cases of missing equipment, spills, public safety, staff safety, which can be activated through multiple sensor types, even down to whether it's asset tracking with RFID, whether it's identifying spills with computer vision, or even we've seen use cases in one of our customers where they're using audio to detect whether equipment is about to fail. So the listening to the noises that the equipment is making, and then go, well, actually that noise has changed, and potentially there's fatigue in that system. Therefore, we can change that before it breaks. So, but again, to your point, Christophe, this needs that consistent platform and the right type of scalability of the device to meet the use case. Because there's no point having a use case, but you need to deploy it to 1,000 locations, and it's $100,000 per location. It's just you're never going to get the budget to do that. So getting that lower end scale is really important, I think, in the platform, which is great. So guys, what are the options that customers have to start exploring these edge use cases? What's the next steps that they can take? We talked about in the previous ones about getting on and doing POCs with the StackHCI platform. Do we have similar things as for customers to come and explore some of these edge use cases specific to their verticals?
Absolutely. I would say the first step is to identify the use cases. Once you have gone around the known use cases and the unknown use cases, what you plan to deploy but you're not sure, then you have made your first step. And then you realize that the platform that you have may probably have some limitations, and you realize what you are looking for in the next platform and how much value it has to bring. So with this use case inventory, then you are ready to consider the characteristic that you expect from that common platform. After that, talk to an expert that will connect those use cases to the technology. How can we map quality control to a set of technology components? How can we map a VDI to a set of technology components? And then you match the use cases and the technology together. Once you have done that, basically you build the business case. How much cost those technology components? How many units? Then you build the business case. So having that reflection, that analysis coming from the use case to the technology is the best approach to build a vertical edge solution.
Makes sense. And Jake, I mean, you work in the architecture team here from Microsoft's perspective. Is that an end-to-end process we can help customers with? So whether if they know the use cases, it's fairly easy to do the technology mapping, I'll say, but can we help with that use case identification piece as well?
100%. Yeah, I think it's a case of drawing out almost the known and the potential unknown. So we know what we want to achieve, we know what the immediate use case is, but also we want to consider how that may change in the future. And that ties into things like, what are the business plans? How do we plan to grow? What plans do we have around some of our applications, our hardware, our types of methods of operation? And that's something we would take that process, look at potential POCs, testing, move that forward. And I think it's really important at that point to call out that process is not a kind of linear A, B, C, D. That's different for each customer use case, but underpinning it with that common platform is the type of process we would take to move that forward.
Cool. Excellent. Thanks both for that. And I mean, hopefully everyone listening now has got a really good understanding of where hybrid cloud fits in that overall cost optimization conversation, the capabilities now of what StackHCI is, and now that it is Azure local. some of the use cases that are in there, and also hopefully that actually the partnership that we have with Microsoft and our capabilities together to help customers actually build them business cases, identify them use cases, and actually drive that innovation is strong. And thank you guys for sharing your thoughts, and thank you everyone for listening. Well, hopefully we'll see you in the next series where we're going to talk about data and AI and also at Modernisation. But for now, we're finished with Hybrid Cloud. I've been Rob Sims, Chief Technologist for CDW.
I've been Jay Walsh, Senior Solution Architect in CDW's Microsoft practice.
And I've been Christophe, who was your local lead for EMEA at Microsoft.
Excellent. Thanks, everyone, and see you next time.
Thanks for tuning in to today's episode. Be sure to check out the back catalogue for more great insights. Don't forget to subscribe via your favourite podcast platform so you never miss an episode. We appreciate your support. And if you have a topic you want us to cover, feel free to reach out. Catch you next time.